Hello, my dear friends. Imagine a cold so deep it feels like the planet itself has forgotten the sun. The air is so brittle it hurts to breathe, and the silence of the snow-covered forest is a heavy, physical presence. In this vast, white emptiness, you see a low, sturdy cabin, a wisp of smoke curling from its roof, a promise of warmth, of life, of shelter. It's an image of perfect, rustic peace. But if you were to step inside that 18th century Yakut home, the profound cold would be the least of your worries. Your modern immune system, and perhaps your sanity, might not survive the welcome. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small click for you, but it makes a world of difference for me, and it ensures you won't miss our future journeys into the quiet, forgotten corners of history. Now, picture yourself there, standing in the crystalline air of the Siberian taiga. Feel the crunch of snow under your feet. The structure before you isn't a log cabin in the way you might imagine. It's a balagan, a traditional Yakut winter home. It's almost pyramid-shaped, built from sturdy larch logs slanted inwards and chinked with a mixture of mud, moss and cow manure which has frozen into a solid, insulating cement. The roof is a heavy blanket of earth and sod. There are no real windows, only small openings covered with translucent panes of stretched animal bladder or, in the deepest winter, blocks of river ice that glow with a strange, ethereal light. It looks ancient, solid, a fortress against the killing frost. It seems to promise a snug, fire-lit haven, a place of stories and hot food, a refuge from the indifferent wilderness. This is the glamorous illusion of survival, the cozy hearth at the heart of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push aside the heavy, stiff horsehide that serves as a door and stoop to enter. The first thing that hits you is not warmth. It is a physical wall of smoke and smell. Your eyes immediately begin to sting and water. The air is thick, grey and acrid, catching in the back of your throat and making you cough. You look up, and through the haze, you can see the reason: a central hearth, an open fire pit dug into the floor, from which a plume of smoke rises towards a simple hole in the ceiling that serves as a chimney. It is a deeply inefficient system. The smoke doesn't so much leave as it lingers. It swirls in the rafters, curing strips of meat and fish hanging there, but it also fills the entire living space with a perpetual, eye-watering haze. You feel like you've walked into a house that's been on fire for a week, and everyone has just decided to live with it. Once your eyes begin to adjust to the dim, smoky light, your other senses kick in, and the shocking reality of this cozy refuge truly reveals itself. The floor isn't wood. It's packed earth, worn smooth by generations of feet, but it's also mixed with manure. It's not just a construction material for the outside walls, it's an integral part of the floor, believed to add to the insulation. And the smell. It's a complex, overwhelming bouquet that no scented candle could ever hope to conquer. Underneath the dominant note of wood smoke is the damp, earthy scent of the floor itself, the sharp tang of ammonia from animal urine, and the undeniable, musky odor of many unwashed human bodies, their sweat and oils sealed into the furs they wear day and night. But there is another scent, one that permeates everything and serves as the bass note for this entire olfactory symphony. It's a sharp, tangy, almost metallic odor. It's the smell of soured milk. Over in the corner, you see several large bags made of horsehide, bulging with a fermenting liquid. This is the source of that pervasive smell, a smell that has soaked into the very logs of this home, into the furs, into the air itself. It is the signature scent of this life. And then, a small movement near the hearth catches your eye. It's not a dog or a cat. It's a newborn calf, spindly and shivering, huddled on a bed of straw. You realize the Yakut herders brought their most vulnerable livestock inside with them during the winter. This single, large room is not just a living room, dining room, and bedroom for an entire multi-generational family. It is also a barn. This is the hidden truth of the welcoming hearth. The romantic image of a family gathered around a crackling fire is shattered by the reality of a single smoky, crowded, and profoundly smelly room. There are no partitions, no private spaces. Benches, wide and covered in more furs, line the walls. These are the beds, the chairs, the workstations, the entire drama of human life: birth, sleep, sickness, intimacy. Death happens here, in public, in the constant company of family and, occasionally, livestock. Your 21st century mind, conditioned to crave personal space and a bedroom door you can close, feels a rising sense of panic. There is nowhere to retreat. But why? Why live like this? The answer is simple and brutal. Survival. This wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was a series of brilliant, if pungent, adaptations. That constant, irritating smoke. It was a tool. It perfectly cured the meat and fish that would sustain them through the winter. It tanned the hides that were their primary form of clothing and wealth. And in the brief, maddening summer, when the air filled with biblical plagues of mosquitoes and black flies, this thick smoke was one of the only things that kept the insects at bay. The smoke wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. Bringing a precious calf or foal inside wasn't about sentimentality. A temperature of -50 degrees Fahrenheit is a death sentence for a newborn animal. Losing that calf meant losing a future source of milk, meat, and wealth. The family's survival was tied directly to the animal's. Its warm body even added a little extra heat to the room. The smell was a negligible price to pay for security. And the lack of privacy. The very concept would have been alien. In this environment, the individual was fragile, but the family unit, the cuz, was strong. Shared warmth, shared food, shared vigilance against predators, and the cold that was the key to life. The group was the only sanctuary that mattered. As your lungs grow accustomed to the smoky air, you notice that sour, tangy smell of milk again. It seems to rise from the very earth, a constant reminder of the substance that fuels this entire existence. You watch as a woman ladles a thick, creamy white liquid from one of the skin bags into a wooden bowl. It's clearly not just a background scent. It is the center of their world, the source of their strength, the very fluid of life. And you are about to discover just how relentlessly, and surprisingly, it dominates every single meal. You are still standing in that smoky, crowded room, your senses overwhelmed. The woman who ladled the thick white liquid from the horsehide bag approaches you. She offers you a carved wooden bowl, its surface worn smooth and dark with age. In the dim, flickering light from the central hearth, the liquid inside looks something like buttermilk or thin yogurt. The smell, however, is far more potent, at sharp, tangy, almost gassy aroma of active fermentation that has permeated this entire home. It's the smell you remember from the end of our last moment together, but now it's no longer in the background. It is right under your nose, a direct, non-negotiable invitation. This, you are given to understand, is a gesture of welcome. The modern part of your brain conjures an image of the ideal natural diet. You think of glossy food blogs and documentaries celebrating wholesome, farm-to-table eating. The glamorous illusion is one of purity, fresh, raw milk, still warm from a mare grazing on wild grasses, rich, yellow butter churned by hand, simple, nourishing foods drawn directly from a pristine, untouched landscape. It's a vision of ultimate health, of living in perfect harmony with nature, consuming only what the land freely offers. It seems a life of simple, delicious sustenance, a stark contrast to our own world of processed ingredients and complex supply chains. You imagine the taste of pure, unadulterated nature. Now, take a closer look at the bowl in your hands. The reality is far from that pristine image. You lift the bowl to your lips, and the shocking truth becomes clear. This is not fresh milk. It is surat, a fermented cow's milk product, the Yakut equivalent of a universal yogurt or kefir, but far more intense. It is sharply sour, with a fizzy, effervescent quality that prickles your tongue. It's not smooth, either. There's a slight graininess to it, and it coats your mouth with a powerful, lingering tang. It is the taste of survival, not luxury. And this is just one of many variations. The Yakut diet is a relentless cycle of fermented dairy. For breakfast, a bowl of surat. For a midday drink to quench your thirst, a cup of kumiz, the famous fermented mare's milk, which is even more sour, more alcoholic, and has a distinctive smoky flavor from being cured in the very skin bags you see hanging in the corner. For dinner, you might have a sliver of tough, boiled meat or fish, but it will be washed down with, and perhaps even cooked in, another fermented milk product. The variety is not in flavor, but in texture and potency. There is thick, clabbered milk, almost like a cheese curd, called tara. There is a frozen version, tar mass, mixed with berries in the summer, creating a sort of sour ice cream. There is boiled and thickened cream. But the foundational taste profile of everything sharp, sour, tangy is inescapable. Your modern palate, accustomed to the distinct categories of sweet, savory, and salty, is thrown into disarray. Sour is not just a flavor, it is the entire culinary universe. Imagine eating nothing but Greek yogurt, sourdough bread, and kombucha for every single meal, every single day. The pure and natural diet you imagined is, in reality, a monotonous, one-note marathon of fermentation. So why this obsession with souring everything? Why not drink the milk fresh? The first reason is biological and deeply ironic. The very people whose lives revolved around dairy were, like many populations in Asia, largely lactose intolerant. The glamorous illusion of drinking fresh, raw milk from the herd would have resulted in severe digestive distress cramps, bloating, and sickness. For them, fresh milk was essentially poison. Fermentation, however, is a kind of external digestion. The bacteria and yeasts that turn the milk sour also break down the lactose into digestible sugars. The souring process was not about flavor preference, it was a biological necessity. It was the only way to unlock the rich proteins, fats, and nutrients in the milk without getting sick. The second reason is a brilliant solution to a deadly problem: preservation. In a world without refrigerators, fresh milk is a ticking clock. It spoils within hours, especially in the brief warmth of summer. Turning it into kumis or suet stops that decay. Fermentation is a form of controlled rot, a way of populating the milk with beneficial bacteria that crowd out the harmful ones. It transforms a highly perishable liquid into a stable food source that could last for days, even weeks. Those bulging horsehide bags aren't just containers, they are living fermentation vessels, a pantry that never goes empty as long as the animals are giving milk. This all-pervasive diet of sour milk was their pharmacy as well. In the long, dark Siberian winter, there were no fresh fruits or vegetables. Scurvy was a constant threat. But fermented milk is a surprisingly good source of vitamin G and B vitamins, created by the fermentation process itself. This sour, tangy liquid was their multivitamin, their defense against disease, their source of gut-healthy probiotics, long before the term was ever invented. The relentless sourness was the taste of health, the flavor of life itself. As you lower the wooden bowl, the tangy aftertaste clinging to your tongue, you look from the sour milk to the animals that produce it. You see that calf by the fire, you hear the distant whinny of a horse outside. You begin to understand that these creatures are not just companions or beasts of burden. They are the living, breathing machinery at the center of this entire world. And you are about to learn that the relationship with the Yakut horse, the most iconic animal of this land, is far more complex and brutal than the noble image of a rider and his steed. The sour taste of the fermented milk still lingers in your mouth, a constant reminder of the internal, biological reality of Yakut life. Your gaze now shifts beyond the smoky confines of the Balagan to the source of it all, the animals. Out in the snow-swept landscape, you see them a herd of shaggy, incredibly resilient horses. They are not tall and elegant like the steeds of European knights or Arabian sheikhs. They are compact, sturdy, with thick necks, short legs, and a magnificent, dense coat of fur that makes them look almost round. They stand calmly in the biting wind, using their hooves to scrape away the deep snow, foraging for the frozen grass beneath in a behavior called tebeneka. This is the famous Yakut horse, an icon of the Siberian wilderness. The glamorous illusion is one of perfect symbiosis, a partnership between human and animal forged in the crucible of the Arctic cold. You picture a Yakut rider, a proud and free figure, galloping across the endless steppe on his noble steed. The horse is his friend, his transport, his companion in solitude. This relationship is often romanticized as a testament to the deep spiritual connection between the herders and their herds, a bond of mutual respect and dependence. The horse is a symbol of wealth, freedom, and the indomitable spirit of the Saka people. It is a creature of almost mythical hardiness, a partner in the dance of survival. But now, you are going to look closer, and the shocking reality behind this partnership will come into focus. You watch a group of men approach the herd. They are not carrying saddles or bridles for a ride across the taiga. They are carrying lassos and a large leather pail. Their movements are efficient, practiced, and devoid of sentimentality. They expertly single out a mare, her foal trailing close behind. The foal is allowed to nurse for just a momentous strategic act, not of kindness, but of necessity. The suckling of the foal triggers the mare's milk to let down. Then, brutally, the foal is pulled away and the men take its place, milking the mare for their own sustenance. The foal may get another chance later, but it will only ever receive a fraction of its mother's milk. The rest is destined for those fermenting horsehide bags back in the balagan. This is the first crack in the illusion. The horse is not primarily a mount. It is a dairy animal. Its milk, fermented into the potent, alcoholic kumis, is a cornerstone of the diet, the social lubricant for all gatherings and a vital source of nutrients. The foals are often kept deliberately underfed to maximize the milk harvest for humans. Weakened and small, many do not survive the harsh winter, a calculated loss in a brutal equation of survival. And the equation gets more brutal still. You see an older horse, one that is no longer useful for breeding or milking. There is no gentle retirement to a green pasture. The animal is swiftly and unceremoniously slaughtered. Every single part of it will be used. The meat, considered a delicacy and a vital source of fat and protein for the winter, is butchered and preserved. You recall the strips of dark meat you saw, hanging from the smoky rafters of the home that was horse meat. The thick hide will be tanned to make the very bags that hold the kumis, or the stiff, weatherproof door of the balagan, or heavy winter boots. The long hair from the mane and tail will be braided into strong ropes and lassos. The bones will be carved into tools, utensils, and ornaments. The fat will be rendered for cooking and for fuel in simple lamps. This is the shocking reality. The noble steed is also the walking pantry. It is a living, breathing multi-tool, a source of transport, yes, but more importantly, a source of milk, meat, leather, hair, and bone. The relationship is not one of friendship, but of profound, unsentimental utility. The horse is cherished not for its personality, but for its product. It is a unit of wealth, a piece of living technology perfectly adapted to the Siberian environment, and it is managed with the same practicality one might apply to a piece of machinery. So, why this seemingly callous approach to such a revered animal? The worldview of the 18th century Yakut herder was not shaped by modern ideas of animal companionship. It was shaped by a landscape where starvation was a constant, looming presence. A horse represented a massive store of calories, insulation, and raw materials. To let one die of old age would be an act of incomprehensible waste, a foolish squandering of resources that could mean the difference between your family surviving the winter or not. Their spiritual beliefs reinforced this. The horse was believed to be a gift from the sky gods, a sacred animal. But this sacredness didn't prevent its slaughter. It dictated how it was to be used. To waste any part of the horse would be an insult to the gods who provided it. The ultimate sign of respect was not to refrain from killing the animal, but to use every single piece of it, to ensure its essence continued to sustain the life of the people. This was a form of sacred recycling, a closed loop of life and death, where the horse's spirit continued its journey by becoming part of the human. The horse's hide provides clothing, its meat provides sustenance, and its milk provides the drink of welcome. You think of the heavy fur coat a man nearby is wearing. It's a magnificent garment, thick and protective. It is the very image of warmth and security against the unforgiving cold. But just like the horse it may have come from, and the smoky home you just left, this beautiful piece of clothing has its own shocking and rather itchy, secret reality. Your attention is drawn to the people themselves, standing stoically in the biting wind. They are wrapped in immense, impressive coats, hats, and boots made of fur. A wealthy man, perhaps a clan leader, wears a long coat of silver fox fur, the guard hairs glistening in the pale light. His hat is a masterpiece of sable, and his boots are made of reindeer calfskin, intricately decorated with beadwork. He looks regal, powerful, a master of this frozen domain. This is the glamorous illusion of Yakut attire, beautiful, luxurious furs, expertly crafted into clothing that is both a status symbol and a perfect adaptation to the environment. It's the image you see in historical illustrations and museum displays, garments of breathtaking artistry that speak of a rich culture and a deep understanding of the natural world. They look warm, clean, and majestic. Now, you are standing closer to this man. As he turns to speak, a faint, yet distinct, puff of dust and dander rises from his collar. And do you catch a scent? It's not the sharp tang of kumis or the acrid smoke of the hearth, but a much more personal aroma. It's the heavy, greasy smell of old sweat, animal fat, and unwashed bodies, all trapped in the dense underfur of his coat. This is the shocking reality of these magnificent garments. They were almost never cleaned. You look more closely at the fur. The beautiful sheen is not just from the natural oils of the fox, but from layers of accumulated grease and grime. The inside of the coat, likely made of a less glamorous but equally warm fur like squirrel or wolf, is matted and dark with the sweat and skin oils of its wearer. To wash a fur coat of this kind with their available technology-cold river water, and perhaps some ash as a cleaning agent, would be to ruin it. The leather would become stiff and brittle, the fur would clump and lose its insulating properties. So, they simply didn't. The coat was worn continuously, day in and day out, all winter long. It served as clothing, blanket, and even mattress. And these coats were not empty. They were thriving, mobile ecosystems. You suppress a shiver that has nothing to do with the cold as you realize that this man's regal furs are almost certainly teeming with lice. Body lice were a simple, unavoidable fact of life. They lived in the seams of the clothing, feeding on their human host, breeding successive generations in the warm, undisturbed environment of the Yakut people were certainly aware of them, and deluzzing was a common social activity, but eradication was impossible. The lice were as much a part of the clothing as the threads that held it together. You suddenly understand the practical function of the long, ornate bone hairpins you've seen women wear. They were not just for decoration, but were also elegant, socially acceptable back scratchers, perfect for reaching an inch deep beneath the layers of fur. The children, too, are bundled in furs, looking like miniature, fluffy animals. But their winter onesies, often made from foal or reindeer hide, had another grimly practical feature. They were often designed with a special opening at the back and filled with a thick layer of absorbent dried moss. In the crushing cold of a Siberian winter, taking a child outside or undressing them for bodily functions was dangerously impractical. The moss served as a disposable, biodegradable diaper, changed whenever it could be done, without risking frostbite. The smell, sealed within the layers of fur, was just another part of the personal atmosphere. So why would a people who created such beautiful things live with such a shocking lack of what we would consider basic hygiene? The why is a masterclass in prioritizing survival. The Yakut worldview was not concerned with sterility or the modern concept of cleanliness. Their primary concern was warmth and the preservation of precious resources. The grease and dirt that accumulated in their fur clothing actually enhanced its performance. This layer of grime helped to make the leather more supple and, crucially, more waterproof. The clean, pristine fur coat would soak up melting snow, freezing the wearer. A seasoned, greasy coat would shed water, keeping the person inside dry and alive. The grease was a functional layer of sealant, an extra defense against the elements. Their very definition of clean was different. It was not about the absence of dirt, but the absence of danger. A clean home was one free of evil spirits. A clean person was one who had performed the correct rituals. Lice were an annoyance, a nuisance, but they were a familiar one. The real dangers were the soul-stealing spirits of the forest or the devastating cold. A louse was never going to kill you, but a poorly cured fur coat absolutely could. The greasy, smelly, inhabited fur coat wasn't a sign of neglect, it was a sign of wisdom. It was a perfectly functioning piece of survival technology, a personal fortress against the lethal cold. The man in the fox fur coat gestures for you to join a gathering. A group of people are laughing, passing a large, ceremonial wooden cup, a korun, from person to person. It is a scene of community and celebration. You are being invited to a social event, a moment of warmth and connection to ward off the chill of the vast, empty land. But you will soon discover that Yakut hospitality, like their clothing and their homes, has a demanding and rather intoxicating reality hiding behind its welcoming smile. You follow the man in the fox fur coat toward the gathering. The scene feels like a welcome respite from the harshness of the landscape. A small group of men and women are huddled together, their faces ruddy from the cold and flushed with good cheer. They are passing around a beautifully carved wooden goblet, the korun, which has 3 ornate legs. Laughter rings out, sharp and clear in the frigid air. The camaraderie is palpable. This is the glamorous illusion of Yakut society, a tight-knit community bound by unbreakable ties of kinship and hospitality. In a land of vast distances and profound isolation, social gatherings are the lifeblood of the culture. They are moments of warmth, storytelling, and mutual support, a testament to human resilience and the power of the collective. To be offered a cup is to be accepted, to be brought into the circle of warmth and trust. The man who invited you takes the korun, and, after taking a deep drink himself, offers it to you. It is brimming with a milky, frothy liquid kumis, the fermented mare's milk you smelled earlier. Not to accept would be a grave insult, a rejection of their community and goodwill. You have no choice. You take the heavy wooden cup, which is surprisingly large and holds far more than a standard glass. This is your invitation to the endless feast of fermented welcome. You raise the cup to your lips, and the shocking reality of this social ritual becomes immediately apparent. The smell is stronger than the surat you tasted before, more alcoholic, smokier, and with a distinctly horsey tang from the skin bag it was cured in. You take a sip, and it is a jolt to your system. It's incredibly sour, fizzy, and undeniably alcoholic. The alcohol content could vary wildly, from something akin to a light beer to a potent, rustic wine. This is not a gentle, celebratory sip. This is a powerful, intoxicating brew, and the expectation is that you drink deeply. You watch as the cup continues its journey around the small circle. Each person drinks, and the cup is immediately refilled from a large leather skin nearby. There is no sense of moderation. The goal of this gathering is not simply to socialize, it is to consume as much kumis as possible. Hospitality here is measured in volume. A good host was one who could provide endless amounts of kumis, and a good guest was one who could drink it just as endlessly. To stop drinking would be to suggest your host's supply and therefore his wealth and generosity is insufficient. It is an obligatory, marathon-like performance of consumption. What you thought was a simple, friendly get-together is, in fact, a high-stakes social and economic transaction. The host is displaying his wealth. The number of mares he owns, the quality of his pastures, the skill of his wife in brewing the kumis, it's all on display in the seemingly bottomless supply of this drink. For the guests, it's a chance to build alliances, to curry favor, and to gauge the status of their neighbors. Refusing to partake, or partaking too little, could be interpreted as a political snub, a sign of disrespect or even hostility. The warm community is underpinned by a rigid, unspoken code of competitive drinking. Your stomach churns slightly, partly from the sour, alcoholic liquid and partly from the social pressure. There is nothing relaxed about this. Why would hospitality take this incredibly demanding, almost aggressive form? The why is rooted in the economics and psychology of a nomadic herding culture in a land of scarcity. First, there was a practical reason. In the brief summer, the mares produced a surplus of milk. Fermenting it into kumis was the only way to preserve this caloric bounty. Throwing a massive feast was a way to share and consume these resources before they could spoil, strengthening social bonds in the process. It was a potlatch-style celebration, where status was gained not by hoarding wealth, but by distributing it lavishly, even wastefully. Second, in a sparsely populated landscape, maintaining social connections was crucial for survival. You might need your neighbor's help during a difficult birth for your livestock, or to fend off a wolf attack, or to borrow food after a bad season. These intense, kumis-fueled gatherings were the primary mechanism for reinforcing those alliances. The shared intoxication broke down barriers, forced intimacy, and created a sense of shared experience and obligation. Getting drunk together wasn't just a side effect of the party, it was the entire point. It was a social technology for manufacturing cohesion. Finally, there was a spiritual dimension. Kumis was considered a sacred drink, a gift from the sky deities. To drink it was to partake in a divine substance that purified the body and strengthened the soul. It was believed to wash away impurities and to fortify a person's cut or soul force against the malevolent spirits that populated the world around them. The more you drank, the more spiritually cleansed and protected you became. This belief in a world teeming with unseen forces, both benevolent and terrifyingly malevolent, was not just a background detail. It was the operating system for the entire Yakut worldview. As the kumis begins to go to your head, the world around you taking on a slightly hazy, unreal quality, you begin to feel the presence of that other world. The laughter of the drinkers seems a little manic, a little desperate, as if they are trying to hold something at bay. You are about to discover that this constant fear of the spirit world and the terrifying demands it made was the true source of the anxieties that rippled just beneath the surface of everyday life. The alcoholic buzz from the obligatory kumis hums in your veins, softening the edges of the frozen landscape. The world feels charged, ancient. In the distance, you see a strange sight, a tall, larch tree, its branches festooned with hundreds of colourful strips of cloth and bundles of horsehair fluttering like prayers in the wind. It's a powerful, beautiful image. This is your entry point into the Yakut spirit world. The glamorous illusion is one of mystical wisdom and deep ecological connection. We imagine the shaman, the central figure of this world, as a romantic character, a sage, a healer, a poet who walks between worlds, communicating with nature spirits and animal guides. It's a vision of a harmonious, nature-based spirituality, where humans live in respectful balance with the land and its unseen guardians. This decorated tree seems a perfect symbol of that harmony, a gentle offering to a benevolent Mother Nature. But as you get closer to the tree, you feel a distinct shift in the atmosphere. The feeling is not one of gentle reverence. It is a feeling of fear. This is not a tree of gratitude. It is a tree of appeasement. And the shaman, you are about to understand, was not primarily a gentle healer. He was a spiritual warrior, a negotiator with forces that were, more often than not, deeply hostile to human existence. The shocking reality of Yakut spirituality was that it wasn't based on harmony, but on a constant, terrified negotiation with a world of predatory spirits. The universe was divided into three realms. The upper world was home to the benevolent creator deities, the A, who gave humans their souls and their most precious livestock. The middle world was our own, the land of people and animals. But the lower world was the domain of the Abasi, a host of malevolent demons and spirits who were the source of all misfortune, disease, and death. These were not mischievous sprites. They were grotesque, monstrous beings, described as one-eyed, one-armed, or made of stone and iron. And they were perpetually hungry. They craved human souls and the souls of their livestock, and they relentlessly sought to steal them. Every unexplained illness, every stillborn calf, every bit of bad luck was attributed to the actions of the Abasi. A child's fever was the work of a demon trying to devour its soul. A plague that wiped out a herd of horses was a full-scale assault by the lower world. Life was a constant, defensive struggle against these unseen aggressors. Those colourful rags tied to the tree are not thank-you notes, they are bribes. They are desperate pleas for safe passage, for a spirit to look the other way, for an Abasi to take the offering of a cloth and leave the traveller's soul alone. This is where the shaman comes in. Here sometimes she was the only one who could travel to the lower world to bargain for a stolen soul or fight off a spiritual attack. His rituals were not the gentle, incense-filled ceremonies we might imagine. They were violent, terrifying performances. The shaman would don his ritual costumey heavy coat laden with iron plates, bells, and representations of bones, essentially spiritual. He would beat his drum, a flat, hide-covered instrument that was his horse for riding between worlds, the rhythm driving him into a state of ecstatic trance. His voice would change, becoming the guttural shrieks of the spirits he was channeling or fighting. It was a frightening spectacle, filled with convulsions, speaking in tongues, and simulated battles. The shaman was not a priest, he was an exorcist, a spiritual surgeon, and a commando, all in one. And the price for his services could be devastating. If a powerful Abasi was causing a sickness, simple offerings weren't enough. The shaman, speaking with the voice of the demon, would demand a blood sacrifice. A horse, a cow, or in the most dire of circumstances, a reindeer, would have to be ritually killed to ransom the sick person's soul. For a herding family, this was an economic catastrophe, but it was a price they had to pay. The alternative was death. The spirit world made constant, terrifying, and impoverishing demands. So why live in such a state of perpetual fear? Why imagine a universe so fraught with malevolent forces? This worldview was a powerful explanatory framework for the randomness and cruelty of life in a harsh environment. When a perfectly healthy child dies suddenly, or a disease sweeps through your herd, the world can feel chaotic and meaningless. Attributing these events to the Abasi gave them a cause, a name, and most importantly, a potential solution. It provided a sense of agency. You weren't helpless in the face of random tragedy. You were a soldier in a cosmic war, and you had a weapon, shaman. This belief system was also a form of social control. The fear of spirits reinforced community norms. Breaking a taboo like, for instance, polluting a stream or speaking ill of an elder was not just a social faux pas, it was an act that could attract the attention of the Abasi and endanger the entire community. The fear was a powerful glue that held the social order together. It externalized danger, turning the natural hardships of life, disease, famine, freak accidents into a narrative of supernatural conflict that could be understood and, with the right rituals and sacrifices, perhaps even won. This entire system of belief was predicated on the Yakut people's relative isolation, allowing their unique cosmology to flourish. For centuries, they were the masters of their domain, their primary struggles being with the climate and the spirits. This isolation seems peaceful, a world apart. But this very peace had its own hidden price. It created a society that was uniquely vulnerable, not to the demons of the lower world, but to a new and encroaching force from the west, a force whose demands would prove even more relentless than those of any Abasi. The memory of the shaman's frantic drum beat and the imagined shrieks of the Abasi fades, replaced by the profound, almost unnerving silence of the taiga. You stand on a small rise, looking out over a vast expanse of snow-dusted forest and frozen marshland, stretching to a horizon that seems 1,000 miles away. There are no roads, no power lines, no contrails in the sky. There is only the wind, the trees, and the immense, quiet land. This is the glamorous illusion of Yakut life, a state of perfect, peaceful isolation. In this narrative, they are a people apart, living self-sufficient lives, untouched by the conflicts and corruptions of the outside world. Their society is a tranquil island in a sea of wilderness, their days governed by the slow, peaceful rhythm of the seasons, their only real struggles being with the elements and the spirit world we just explored. It's a vision of pristine cultural purity, a society in a snow globe. But now, let's shatter that snow globe. The shocking reality is that this isolation was not the gentle sanctuary we imagine. It was, in itself, a source of profound hardship and hidden conflict. And it was never as complete as we think. The Yakut people had a name for their northern neighbors, the Evenks, Tunghayas, which could be translated as our people who are strangers. While there was trade, there was also tension. Disputes over hunting grounds and pasture lands could and did flare into violent, small-scale conflicts. A stolen reindeer or a territorial transgression could lead to brutal, retaliatory raids between clans and neighboring ethnic groups. Peace was not a default state, it was a fragile truce in a landscape of scarce resources. More insidiously, this isolation created a kind of social pressure cooker. Remember that obligatory, endless feast of cumis. In a world where your only social interactions are with the same few dozen people, every relationship is freighted with immense significance. There was no escaping your neighbors, your in-laws, or your rivals. Grudges could simmer for generations. A public insult at a summer festival could fester through the long, dark winter, poisoning the well of community life. The lack of an outside meant there was no escape valve for these internal pressures. The peace was often a tense, guarded quiet, not a relaxed tranquility. And then there was the price of isolation from a wider world of knowledge. When a new and devastating disease arrived, there was no pre-existing immunity, no understanding of its transmission. Remember the lice in the fur coats? While the Yakut had their own pharmacopoeia of herbal remedies and shamanic rituals for familiar ailments, they were completely unprepared for what was coming. Smallpox, introduced by encroaching Russian traders and settlers, ripped through the population with terrifying speed and lethality. It was an enemy their shamans could not fight, an Abasi that demanded no sacrifice, but took everyone. Their isolation, which for centuries had been a shield, suddenly became a catastrophic vulnerability. The greatest illusion, however, was that their isolation was ever truly complete. Beginning in the 17th century, a new power began to push its way into this pristine world, the Russian Empire. The first to arrive were not armies, but Cossack adventurers and fur traders drawn by the lure of what they called soft gold, the precious pelts of sable, ermine and silver fox. This is the ultimate why behind the shattering of the peace. The Yakut world sat atop one of the richest fur territories on the planet, and the Tsar in faraway Moscow had an insatiable appetite for its wealth. The Russians arrived with firearms, iron tools, and an unshakable belief in their own authority. They established small forts, called ostrogs, which became centers of trade and tribute collection. They demanded a fur tax, the yasak, from every Yakut man. Clan leaders were taken hostage to ensure compliance. the peaceful isolation was revealed to be an illusion, a temporary state that lasted only as long as they remained undiscovered by a more powerful, expansionist neighbor. This encroachment was, at first, a trickle. A few traders, a handful of officials, the Yakut people tried to incorporate them into their world, to trade with them, to understand them through the lens of their own cosmology. But the Russians were not like the Evenks, fighting over a few reindeer. They were the vanguard of an empire, and they were not there to coexist. They were there to rule. The very concept of peace began to change. It no longer meant an absence of conflict with a neighboring clan. It meant navigating the complex and often violent demands of a foreign power. The invisible war against the Abbasi was slowly being replaced by a very real struggle against the Tsar and his agents. The pressure of the Yasak distorted the entire Yakut economy, forcing them to spend more time hunting and trapping fur-bearing animals and less time tending their precious herds. The fabric of their self-sufficient life was beginning to unravel. Yet, for much of the 18th century, they managed a delicate balancing act, adapting and resisting, holding on to their core traditions. The high point of this cultural persistence was their great summer festival, Yahayach. It stands as the ultimate symbol of their vibrant culture. But as we will see, this joyous celebration was also a frantic, almost desperate attempt to gather spiritual strength before the inevitable return of darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The grip of the long, dark winter finally loosens. The sun, a stranger for many months, returns with a startling intensity, and the land undergoes a violent, rapid transformation. Snow melts away to reveal a carpet of new grass and wild flowers. The air, once brittle and silent, is now filled with the buzzing of insects and the calls of migratory birds. This is the brief, glorious Siberian summer, and it is time for Yahayach, the great New Year festival. The glamorous illusion of Yahayach is one of pure, unadulterated joy. It's pictured as a kind of Yakut Woodstock, a peaceful, multi-day gathering of clans to celebrate the rebirth of nature and the renewal of life. Families travel for days to a sacred meadow, setting up their elegant summer tents, the conical urasa. The days are filled with feasting on fresh meat and dairy, athletic contests, wrestling matches, horse races, and the telling of epic poems by celebrated bards. At the center of it all is a massive, communal circle dance, the Oukai, where hundreds of people link arms and move in a slow, sun-wise direction, singing praise to the benevolent sky gods. It seems a gentle, beautiful, and profoundly peaceful celebration of community and nature. Now, you are part of this celebration. You stand in the sacred meadow, surrounded by hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people. The air is thick with the smells of cooking fires, fresh-cut grass, and of course the ubiquitous, tangy aroma of kumis, which flows more freely now than at any other time of year. But as the festivities get underway, the shocking reality behind this joyous facade begins to emerge. This is not a relaxed, gentle party. There is a manic, frantic energy crackling underneath the surface. Yahayach is not just a celebration of summer's arrival, it is a desperate, obligatory ritual to spiritually fortify the entire community for the terrifying return of winter's darkness and the ever-present threat of the Abbasi. The feasting is not just for pleasure, it's a race against time. This is the season of plenty, and the goal is to consume as much nutrient-rich food as possible, to build up a layer of fat that will help sustain you through the lean months ahead. The athletic contests are not just for fun, they are a deadly serious display of a man's strength and suitability as a warrior and provider. The epic poems are not just entertainment, they are a ritual reaffirmation of the people's divine origins and their spiritual right to this land, a magical defense against the forces that would seek to drive them from it. And the kumis drinking it reaches a fever pitch. Remember the obligatory hospitality we witnessed before. Amplify that by 1,000. Enormous quantities are consumed, not just for social bonding, but as a sacred duty. It is a mass purification ritual, an attempt to get so thoroughly filled with the divine, soul-strengthening liquid that there is no room left for the influence of evil spirits. The drunkenness is not a byproduct of the festival, it is a core objective. The most intense part of the ritual is the central welcoming of the sun, led by the Algiskit, a white-robed ceremonial master, who is distinct from the dark-robed shaman who deals with the lower world. He faces the east, arms outstretched, and chants a long, hypnotic prayer, thanking the sky gods for their mercy and begging them for their continued protection. The mood is not one of confident praise, but of desperate supplication. It's a collective plea bargain with the universe. And the great circle dance, the Oukai, is more than just a dance. It is a massive, human-powered prayer wheel. As the circle turns, it is believed to generate a powerful field of positive spiritual energy, a shield that will protect the community's collective soul force, their cut, during the coming darkness. The dance can go on for hours, even days, becoming a hypnotic, exhausting, trance-inducing marathon. To break the circle is to weaken the spell. Why this frantic, almost desperate need to celebrate? The why lies in the Yakut conception of the year. It wasn't a gentle, cyclical wheel, but a stark duality, the good time of light and the evil time of darkness. Summer was a brief, miraculous respite, a temporary victory of the forces of life over the forces of death. But winter was always coming back. The Abesi were not defeated, merely held at bay by the sun's power. The Hayak was the one chance to gather as a people and perform the necessary rituals on a massive scale, to supercharge their spiritual batteries for the ordeal ahead. It was less a celebration and more of a spiritual and physical mobilization for war. It was a manic preparation for a 9-month siege. The frantic energy comes from the knowledge that this window of opportunity is terrifyingly short. The Siberian summer is intense but fleeting. The festival is a race to perform all the rites, drink all the kumis and forge all the social and spiritual bonds before the light begins to fail. There is an undercurrent of anxiety to all the joy, a knowledge that the clock is ticking. This beautiful, vibrant gathering is, in essence, a massive, communal whistling past the graveyard. As the festival winds down, the families pack up their Urasa tents and begin their long journeys home. The sacred meadow falls silent once more. The days begin to shorten, the air grows cooler, and a sense of foreboding creeps back into the landscape. The spiritual shield has been raised, the body has been fortified. Now, all that is left is to endure. You are about to face the long, brutal stillness of the Siberian winter, where the romantic notion of cozy hibernation meets the grim reality of a world frozen in ice. The manic energy of the Hayak festival is a distant, feverish memory. The sun, which blazed with such intensity just a few months ago, is now a pale, low-hanging disk that barely clears the horizon for a few hours each day. The world is rendered in shades of white, grey, and the deep blue-black of shadow. A profound stillness has fallen over the land, a silence so complete it has weight. The rivers are frozen solid, the ground is like iron, and the larch trees stand like brittle skeletons against the sky. This is the great Siberian winter, Kaisin. The glamorous illusion is one of cozy tranquility, a time of well-earned rest and peace. We imagine the Yakut family, their larder full from the summer, gathered snugly in their smoky balagan. This is the time for storytelling, for mending tools, for carving intricate wooden bowls, for sleeping late under warm fur blankets. It's a romantic vision of hibernation, a quiet, domestic retreat from the harshness of the world, a period of peaceful introspection before the return of spring. The silence is not empty, but full of a deep, restful peace. The fortress-like home, which seemed so crowded in our first encounter, now feels like the coziest place on earth. You are now inside that balagan once again, weeks, perhaps months, into the deep freeze. The initial shock of the smoke and smells has faded into a dull, constant reality. The shocking truth of the winter is that this is not a time of peaceful rest, but one of crushing boredom, gnawing hunger, and a profound, soul-deep cold that seems to radiate from the very bones of the earth. The stillness outside is not peaceful, it is menacing. The full larder you imagined is a fantasy. The cured meat and fish that hang in the rafters must be rationed with painful strictness. The supply of fermented milk from the summer is dwindling. Fresh food is non-existent. The diet becomes a grim, monotonous rotation of the same few preserved items, often of questionable quality after months of storage. Hunger is a constant, low-level ache, a dull background hum to every waking moment. By late winter, the period known as the time of the bull's horns breaking from the cold, the threat of starvation becomes very real. The family might be reduced to boiling scraps of leather or old hides just to have something warm to put in their stomachs. And then there is the boredom. The deep, mind-numbing, existential boredom of being trapped in a single, dark, smoky room for months on end with the same handful of people. The stories have all been told, the tools have all been mended. There is nothing to do but sit, wait, and try not to get on each other's nerves. The lack of privacy, which was a source of communal strength, can curdle into a source of immense friction. Every small annoyance is magnified, every personality clash exacerbated by the enforced, inescapable proximity. The cozy refuge becomes a claustrophobic prison, and the cold is a physical entity, an enemy that is never vanquished, only held at bay. The fire in the central hearth can never be allowed to go out. Collecting firewood is a major and dangerous daily chore. A man must venture out into the killing frost for hours, his breath freezing instantly on his furs, his fingers and toes constantly at risk of frostbite. Inside, the temperature is a gradient. It might be tolerable near the fire, but just a few feet away, near the walls, the air is freezing. Water instantly turns to ice. The ice block windows cast a ghostly, pale light, but do nothing to stop the seeping cold. You sleep huddled together under a mountain of furs, not for comfort, but for shared body heat, waking up with your breath frozen in a cloud of rime above your face. This is the reality of hibernation, not a peaceful sleep, but a state of suspended animation, a low-energy battle of attrition against cold and hunger. Life is stripped down to its barest essentials: stay warm, conserve energy, and pray you have enough food to make it to the spring thaw. So why endure this? What was the logic behind this seemingly miserable existence? The answer is that there was no alternative. This was not a choice, but a geographical and climatic imperative. The Siberian winter is one of the most extreme environments on Earth inhabited by humans. The strategies the Yakut developed, the insulated balagan, the food preservation techniques, the communal living were the only things that made survival possible. They were not designed for comfort. They were designed to minimize risk and conserve calories. The spiritual worldview also played a crucial role. Winter was the time when the Abasi, the demons of the lower world, were at their most powerful. The sun was weak, and the darkness belonged to them. To venture out, unnecessarily, was to risk encountering one of these malevolent entities. The deep stillness of the land was seen as proof of their dominion. The home, the balagan, with its central hearth, was not just a physical shelter, it was a tiny, fortified bubble of human life in a world overrun by death and evil. The boredom and hunger were preferable to the spiritual dangers that lurked outside in the frozen dark. The winter was a time to lay low, to make oneself small and quiet, and to not attract the attention of the hungry spirits. As you sit in the smoky dimness, listening to the gnawing silence, you think about the source of your dwindling food supply. You think about the horses and cattle outside, enduring the same cold, their survival just as precarious as your own. These animals are the family's entire net worth, their savings account, their insurance policy. You are about to understand that wealth in this world wasn't measured in gold or silver, but in a fragile, breathing currency of hooves and hides that could be wiped out in an instant. The bleakness of the winter presses in, a physical weight in the smoky air of the balagan. Your thoughts drift from the immediate discomforts of hunger and cold to the larger question of security. In your own world, wealth means numbers in a bank account, a portfolio of stocks, a deed to a house, abstract, protected and relatively stable concepts. Here, you look around at the meager supplies, and you think of the animals outside, the source of this family's entire existence. The glamorous illusion of Yakut wealth is one of rustic, pastoral abundance. We picture a wealthy clan leader, a Toyan, surveying his vast herds of horses and cattle spread across a lush summer pasture. His riches are visible, tangible, a living testament to his success and his favor with the gods. He is the Siberian equivalent of a cattle baron, his power and influence directly proportional to the number of hooves he controls. His wealth is natural, wholesome, a stark contrast to the grubby, abstract finances of the modern world. It's a vision of wealth as it should be tied to the land, to living things, to real, tangible assets. Now, step out of the balagan for a moment into the brutal reality of a winter morning. You join one of the men as he goes to check on the herd. The animals are huddled together for warmth, their thick coats covered in a layer of frost. They look gaunt, their ribs showing beneath their shaggy fur. This is the shocking truth. Yakut wealth was not a stable asset. It was a living, breathing, and terrifyingly fragile currency. It could be wiped out overnight by forces entirely beyond human control. You see a cow lying on its side in the snow, unmoving. It did not survive the night. The cold, or perhaps a lack of sufficient fodder, has claimed it. The family's net worth has just taken a tangible, irreversible hit. But the cold is just one of many threats. An outbreak of disease, anthrax, foot and mouth could sweep through the herd like wildfire, turning a wealthy family into beggars in a matter of weeks. Remember, there are no veterinarians, no antibiotics. The only defenses are quarantine and shamanic rituals, which are often powerless against a virulent pathogen. Then there are the predators. While the men are out chopping wood, a pack of wolves, made bold by hunger, could descend on the herd, scattering the animals and bringing down several in a bloody frenzy. A single bear, waking from hibernation, could wreak havoc. The wealth that seems so solid can literally be eaten. Even the summer, the supposed time of abundance, holds its own perils. A drought could wither the pastures, leaving the animals weak and thin as they head into winter. Or, conversely, a wet, cold summer could ruin the hay harvest, leading to a shortage of winter fodder with equally deadly results. The value of your portfolio is entirely dependent on the whims of the weather. And then, there is the pressure from the Russian fur trade, which we touched on earlier. The yasak, the fur tribute, adds another layer of economic instability. To pay the tax, men have to spend more time away from the herds, hunting for sable and fox. This neglect can lead to losses among the livestock. Furthermore, the Russians often demanded the yasak payment in the highest quality furs. A Toyen might be forced to trade several of his precious horses or cows to acquire the necessary pelts from hunters, further diminishing his primary source of wealth. The living currency of livestock was constantly being devalued by the external demands for the dead currency of fur. So why cling to such a volatile and precarious form of wealth? The why is that there was no other system available that was so perfectly suited to their environment and lifestyle. Livestock, unlike gold, is a productive asset. It reproduces itself. A herd that survives the winter can grow in the summer, increasing the family's wealth. It provides a constant stream of resources the milk, meat, and hides we've discussed. You can't eat a sack of coins, and you can't wear a gold bar to protect yourself from the cold. The horse was also their only means of transportation across the vast distances of the taiga. Wealth had to be mobile. The entire social and spiritual structure was built around this livestock-based economy. A man's status, his ability to attract a wife, the bride price he had to pay, it was all calculated in heads of cattle and horses. The sacrifices demanded by the shamans to appease the Abersi spirits were paid in livestock. The gods of the upper world were believed to be celestial herders themselves, and the Yakut saw themselves as the caretakers of the sacred herds on earth. To abandon this system would be to abandon their entire culture, their identity, and their relationship with the cosmos. This fragile, breathing economy demanded a specific kind of human body to manage Itone that was resilient, hardy, and capable of enduring incredible hardship. The Yakut people are often portrayed as paragons of health, perfectly adapted to their extreme environment. But as the winter drags on and the food supply dwindles, you start to see the cracks in that facade. You are about to discover the reality of health and medicine in this world, where incredible resilience existed side by side with a shocking vulnerability to things both microscopic and mundane. You are back in the dim, smoky confines of the winter home, the Balagan. The air is stale. The mood is listless. A child in the corner has a persistent, racking cough. An old woman groans softly, rubbing a painful joint. The image of the hardy, indomitable Siberian native, a person of almost superhuman resilience, begins to fray at the edges. This is the glamorous illusion of Yakut health, a people in perfect physical harmony with their environment. Forged by the extreme cold and a life of physical labor, they are portrayed as incredibly tough, immune to the minor ailments that plague softer societies. Their diet of natural, fermented foods and their active lifestyle, we imagine, made them paragons of robust health. Their medicine, based on ancient folk wisdom and powerful shamanic healing, was a holistic system that cared for both body and soul. They seemed to possess a kind of innate, rugged vitality. Now, look closer at the coughing child. Her face is pale, her breathing shallow. In the smoky, poorly ventilated room, her cough is shared by several other family members. The shocking reality is that while the Yakut were indeed incredibly tough, their lives were a constant negotiation with pain, sickness, and infection, often treated with remedies that ranged from the ineffective to the actively harmful. That robust vitality was a survivor's trait, not a universal condition. Let's start with the everyday ailments. Respiratory infections, like the one afflicting the child, were rampant. Huddling together in a smoky, unventilated space for months on end was a perfect recipe for the spread of tuberculosis, pneumonia, and influenza. The constant smoke inhalation itself led to chronic lung problems. Eye infections and a condition similar to snow blindness were common, caused by the combination of acrid smoke inside and the blinding glare of the sun on snow outside. And then, there were the parasites. Remember the unwashed furs and the diet of raw or lightly cooked meat and fish? This was an open invitation to a host of internal and external parasites. Tapeworms and roundworms were a common, if unpleasant, fact of life. The lice we encountered earlier were just the most visible of the creatures that shared their lives. Their incredible resilience was not an immunity to these things, but a high tolerance for carrying a significant parasitic load. When sickness did strike, the treatments were a gamble. Their folk medicine contained some genuinely effective remedies. They knew which plants could be used as poultices to reduce swelling, which barks could be brewed into teas to soothe a fever, and that the moss they used as diapers had antiseptic properties. But for every effective remedy, there was one based on sympathetic magic. The cure for jaundice might involve wearing a necklace of yellow-beaked birds' heads. To treat a wound, they might apply a paste of chewed rye and earth, a practice almost guaranteed to cause a severe infection. And if the folk remedies failed, the shaman was called. As we saw, the shaman's diagnosis was always spiritual. A soul had been stolen by the abbesi. The treatment was a physically and economically draining ritual that did nothing to address the biological cause of the illness. A family could beggar itself sacrificing its precious livestock to cure a disease that was actually caused by a bacterium. The ultimate why behind this precarious state of health is a story of adaptation and isolation. Their bodies were brilliantly adapted to the specific challenges of their ancestral environment. They had metabolic adaptations to the cold and a high-fat diet. Their immune systems were conditioned to handle the specific pathogens and parasites native to the taiga. This created a state of equilibrium, albeit a tough and often painful one. The real catastrophe came when their isolation was breached. The arrival of the Russians introduced a host of new diseases for which they had absolutely no immunity. Smallpox, as mentioned, was the most devastating, but measles, scarlet fever and syphilis also tore through the population. To the Yakut, these were terrifying new plagues, far more deadly than anything their own abbesi could conjure. Their shamans were powerless, their folk remedies useless. The very resilience that had been their strength became a fatal weakness, as their immune systems had never been taught how to fight these new invaders. A disease that was a survivable childhood illness in Europe could wipe out an entire Yakut clan. This brutal calculus of survival shaped every stage of life, starting from the very beginning. The tough, resilient adult you see before you is a product of a harsh selection process. Childhood in this world was not the carefree, protected state we cherish today. It was a rigorous, and often short, apprenticeship for a life of unrelenting hardship. You are about to see that the games children played were, in fact, deadly serious lessons in survival. You watch a small boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, as he struggles to help his father mend a fishing net. His small fingers are clumsy with the thick, stiff cord, but he works with a focused intensity that seems far too serious for his age. A younger girl sits nearby, not playing with a doll, but practicing how to scrape a piece of animal hide with a sharpened bone, her brow furrowed in concentration. The glamorous illusion of a natural childhood is one of freedom and play. We imagine Yakut children running wild and free through the summer meadows, learning about the world through joyful, unstructured exploration. Their games are seen as charmingly rustic, playing with carved animal figures, chasing each other through the woods, living an idyllic life unburdened by the rigid schedules and academic pressures of modern schooling. It's a vision of a childhood perfectly in tune with nature, a time of innocent wonder. Now, look again at the boy with the net. His father is not patiently instructing him, he is correcting the boy's mistakes with a gruff, impatient tug on the cord. The boy flinches, but keeps working. This is the shocking reality. For a Yakut child in the 18th century, childhood was not a protected phase of life dedicated to play. It was a rigorous, full-time apprenticeship for adulthood, and the training began almost as soon as a child could walk. There was no clear line between play and work, because every game was a lesson in a skill that could mean the difference between life and death. A boy's first toy would be a miniature bow and arrow. He wouldn't be shooting at a straw target for fun. He'd be taught to hunt mice and small birds around the camp. This wasn't just a game, it was learning the fundamentals of stalking, aiming and killing that he would one day need to hunt caribou or bear. It also provided a tiny, but not insignificant, supplement to the family's diet. He would be given a small lasso and taught to practice on the dogs, then the calves, learning the roping skills essential for managing the herd. He would learn to ride a horse almost before he could run, his small legs barely able to straddle the animal's broad back. A girl's apprenticeship was just as demanding. That play of scraping a hide was the first step in learning the long, laborious, and absolutely essential process of tanning leather for clothing, tents, and storage bags. She would learn to distinguish dozens of edible and medicinal plants from their poisonous lookalikes. She would spend countless hours helping her mother milk the cows and mares, her small hands learning the rhythm and feel of the work. Her most important task would be mastering the complex art of fermentation, learning by taste and smell when the surat and kumis were ready. A woman who couldn't properly manage the dairy production was a liability. There was very little room for what we would consider carefree play. The environment was too demanding, the margins of survival too thin. A mistake made during play could be fatal. A child who wandered too far from the camp could freeze to death or be taken by a predator. A child who ate the wrong berry could die in agony. Consequently, children were kept under close watch and their activities were strictly channeled into productive, educational tasks. The stories they were told by the elders were not gentle fairy tales. They were epic poems about warrior heroes and terrifying cautionary tales about the Abhayasi, filled with practical lessons, about taboos to observe and dangers to avoid. So why this seemingly harsh and abbreviated childhood? The why is rooted in a brutal pragmatism. The average life expectancy was low, and the working life of an adult was short and arduous. A person had to become a productive member of the family unit as quickly as possible. There simply wasn't the luxury of a long, unproductive childhood. The skills required to survive as a herder, hunter, and homemaker in the Siberian taiga were immensely complex and could not be learned from a book. They had to be absorbed through years of hands-on experience, starting from the earliest possible age. This system also instilled the core cultural values of endurance, diligence, and respect for elders. The child learned from an early age that their individual wants were secondary to the needs of the family collective. They learned that survival depended on mastering their tasks and contributing to the household economy. This was not seen as cruelty. It was seen as a parent's fundamental duty. To raise a child who was lazy or unskilled was to sentence that child to a life of hardship and failure, and to potentially endanger the entire family. A good childhood was one that successfully prepared you for the grim realities of adulthood. As you watch the young girl meticulously scraping the hide, your eyes are drawn to her mother, who is engaged in the back-breaking work of churning butter in a tall, wooden plunger. You realize that while the men's work of hunting and herding is more visible and often more celebrated in the epic tales, it is the ceaseless, unseen labor of the women that forms the very foundation of this entire society. You are about to look past the revered image of the matriarch to see the exhausted engine who truly keeps the hearth burning. Your gaze rests on the woman churning butter. Her movements are rhythmic, powerful, and unceasing. Her arms and back are clearly strong, conditioned by a lifetime of this same motion. Around her, the entire domestic world is in motion, and she is its center. An older woman is mending a faux garment, another is grinding barley on a stone quern, and the young girl you were just watching continues her lesson in scraping hides. The man of the house may be the public face of the family, the Toyan who speaks at gatherings, but here, inside the balagan, a different power structure is visible. This is the glamorous illusion of the Yakut woman, the revered matriarch, the keeper of the hearth. In this view, she is honored and respected, holding a position of great authority within the domestic sphere. She is the guardian of the family's traditions, the mistress of the home, and the sacred link to the hearth goddess, an Alakchine Khotan. Her role is seen as separate from the man's, but equal in importance partnership that keeps the world in balance. She is often depicted as a figure of serene wisdom and quiet strength, the calm, stable center of the family universe. Now, look beyond that serene image and see the shocking reality of her existence. That rhythmic churning is just one task in a day that is a relentless, exhausting cycle of hard physical labor. The Yakut woman was not so much the serene keeper of the hearth as she was its stoker, its fueler, its builder, and its janitor. Her work was not a separate but equal sphere. It was the non-stop, invisible engine that made everything else possible. Her day began before dawn, with the rekindling of the fire. She was responsible for milking the cows and maize, a demanding, twice daily chore in any weather. Then came the processing of that milk, churning the butter, preparing the surat and kumis, making the sour cheese curds. Remember those heavy, bulging horsehide bags of fermenting milk? They had to be constantly agitated, monitored, and refilled. This was a complex, scientific process passed down through generations, and the well-being of the entire family depended on her getting it right. Then came the food preparation, cooking the day's meals over the smoky open fire, a task that required constant tending. And the clothing, every single garment worn by the family was made by her, from start to finish. This involved a chain of incredibly laborious tasks. She had to harvest and process the sinew for thread. She had to skin the animals her husband hunted, a messy, difficult job. Then came the weeks-long, stinking process of tanning the hides, using a mixture of animal brains, sour milk and smoke, and physically working the leather until it was supple. Only then could she begin the intricate work of cutting and sewing the furs into the coats, hats, and boots that kept her family from freezing to death. And the home itself. The men built the wooden frame of the balagan, but it was the women's job to do the chinking, mixing the mud, moss, and manure and plastering it into the cracks. They were responsible for maintaining the earthen floor, for gathering the moss that served as insulation and diapers, and for the endless, thankless task of trying to maintain a semblance of order in a crowded, multi-purpose, one-room home that was also a barn. On top of all this, of course, was the bearing and raising of children who, as we've seen, were integrated into this world of work from their earliest years. The man's work was often seasonal and task-oriented. He went on a hunt. He went to cut firewood. He took the herds to pasture. These tasks were arduous and dangerous, but they had a beginning and an end. The woman's work was circular, cyclical, and never, ever finished. There was always more milk to churn, more hides to scrape, more food to cook, more clothing to mend. Her labor was the constant, humming background noise of Yakut life. So why was this staggering workload her accepted reality? The why is woven into the very fabric of the Yakut cosmology and social structure. The division of labor was considered sacred, ordained by the gods. The hearth was the domain of the woman, and everything associated with it, food, clothing, the home itself, was her responsibility. This was not seen as a burden, but as her sacred duty. Her role as the processor of food and the creator of clothing gave her a kind of magical authority. She was the one who transformed the raw products of the man's hunt into the things that sustained life. She was an alchemist, turning blood and milk and fur into warmth, food, and culture. This spiritual importance, however, did not translate into an easier life. It sanctified her labor, making it an unchangeable part of the cosmic order. To complain about the work would be to question the wisdom of the gods. Her power was the power to uphold the foundations of society, but the cost was a life of unceasing toil. The serene matriarch of the illusion was, in reality, a person who likely never knew a day of true rest in her entire adult life, a person whose body was worn out by the sheer, grinding effort of keeping everyone else alive. Her entire world, from the animals she milked to the fire she tended, was intimately connected to the earth beneath her feet. The land was not just a backdrop for this life, it was an active participant. You are about to stand in that vast Siberian landscape and feel how its breathtaking, awe-inspiring beauty hides a profound and terrifying indifference and a host of dangers that have nothing to do with spirits or predators. You step away from the smoky balagan and the scenes of human toil, and you find yourself alone, standing in the immense landscape of the Yakutian taiga. It is summer. The sky is a vast, high dome of impossible blue. The air is clean and smells of pine resin and damp earth. A sea of larch and birch trees stretches in every direction, their leaves are vibrant, almost electric green. The ground is a soft carpet of moss, dotted with the brilliant colors of wildflower purple fireweed, yellow buttercups, delicate white anemones. The silence is broken only by the gentle hum of insects and the distant cry of a bird. This is the glamorous illusion of the Siberian wilderness, a pristine, majestic, and fundamentally benevolent nature. It's the landscape of epic films and nature documentaries, a paradise of untouched beauty. We see it as a source of spiritual renewal, a place of peace and solitude, a pure world that stands in stark contrast to our own crowded, polluted environments. The land is a beautiful, passive canvas upon which the drama of human and animal life unfolds. It is, in a word, breathtaking. Now, take a few steps. The soft, mossy ground under your feet gives way with a strange, spunny lurch. You are walking on permafrost, just a foot or two beneath this thin, green skin of life, The ground is frozen solid, a remnant of the last ice age. This is the shocking reality. This beautiful landscape is profoundly unstable, treacherous, and actively hostile to permanent settlement. The very ground you are standing on is a trap. In the summer, only the top layer, the active layer, thaws. This creates a waterlogged, marshy environment because the meltwater has nowhere to drain. The entire region becomes a giant, soggy bog. The beautiful meadows are breeding grounds for the most terrifying plague of all, insects. The gentle hum you heard from a distance becomes a deafening, maddening roar as you are swarmed by clouds of mosquitoes so thick they can obscure the sun. They are joined by biting black flies and horseflies that can draw blood even through thick clothing. Remember the constant, acrid smoke of the balagan? It was the only refuge from this whinge torment. The beautiful summer was a season of constant, itching misery. And the permafrost creates even stranger dangers. The ground is in constant, subtle motion. As ice lenses within the soil melt and refreeze, the land heaves and sinks. A perfectly flat meadow one year might be a field of hummocks and water-filled pits the next. The Yakut learned not to build their winter homes on what seemed like solid ground. They had to read the subtle signs of the land to find a stable spot, lest their home be swallowed by a summer thaw. The landscape itself is trying to devour you. In this land of frozen ground, rivers are the only real highways. But even they are treacherous. In spring, the ice breakup is a violent, explosive event called the Yakut. Massive sheets of ice, feet thick, are pushed downstream with incredible force, scouring the riverbanks and destroying everything in their path. Then, in early winter, the rivers freeze from the bottom up, creating a dangerous phenomenon called nailed ice, where water is forced up through cracks and freezes in layers on top of the main ice sheet, creating a dangerously unstable surface. Why would anyone choose to live in such a beautiful, but profoundly treacherous, and indifferent land? The why is that the Yakut did not see themselves as separate from this landscape. They were an integral part of it. They did not try to conquer or tame it. They learned to move with its rhythms. Their entire nomadic lifestyle was a brilliant adaptation to the challenges of the permafrost. They moved their herds from winter pastures to summer pastures not just to find fresh grass, but to avoid turning one area into a muddy, unusable swamp. Their light, portable summer tents, the Urasa, were perfectly designed for a landscape where you could never put down permanent roots. Their worldview was a direct reflection of this environment. They saw spirits in the land, not just the evil Abasi, but spirits of the rivers, the forests, and the mountains. These were not gentle, nature-loving sprites. They were powerful, capricious beings who had to be respected and appeased. You did not pollute a stream, because the spirit of the stream would retaliate by making your children sick. You did not cut down a sacred tree, because the forest spirit would lead you astray and let you freeze. These beliefs were not just superstitions, they were a set of ecological rules for survival, a way of codifying a deep, hard-won knowledge of a dangerous and unpredictable land. They understood that the land was not a passive canvas. It was a living, breathing, and often lethal entity. Its beauty was the beautiful pattern on a predator's back, something to be admired from a distance, and with the utmost respect. This delicate, millennia-old balance between the people and their indifferent land was predicated on their isolation. But as we have seen, that isolation was an illusion. The trickles of Russian influence in the 17th century had, by the late 18th century, become a steady stream. The demands of a faraway emperor were beginning to weigh more heavily on daily life than the moods of the local spirits. You are about to witness how the shadow of the Russian Empire began to fall across the taiga, slowly and inexorably altering the very fabric of Yakut existence. You are standing at the edge of a Yakut encampment, watching a man load his horse not with supplies for a hunt, but with a carefully bundled pile of luxurious fursible, fox and ermine. He has a worried, weary look on his face. He is not preparing for a journey to a neighboring clan or a festival. He is preparing for a trip to the local Ostrog, the Russian administrative fort, to pay the tribute. The glamorous illusion of the Yakut people in the 18th century is one of enduring cultural sovereignty. Even with the presence of the Russians, we tend to imagine them as largely autonomous, maintaining their traditional ways of life on the periphery of the empire. The Russian influence is seen as a minor detail, a distant cloud on the horizon that has not yet broken. The Yakut Toyans, the clan leaders, are still in charge, their authority over their own people intact. They are masters of their own destiny, simply engaging in a bit of trade with the newcomers. But now, you see the reality of that man's journey, and the shocking truth of their situation becomes clear. He is not a trader, he is a taxpayer. And the tax he is paying is not in money, but in the most valuable commodity of the land, the soft gold of fur. The Yakut people were not on the periphery of the Russian Empire, they were a vital, conquered part of its economic engine. The Tsar's demand for the yasak, the fur tribute, was not a suggestion. It was a relentless, non-negotiable, and often brutally enforced extraction of wealth that fundamentally warped their society. The local Toyon was no longer an independent leader. He had been transformed into a low-level, unpaid colonial administrator. The Russians made the clan leaders responsible for collecting the yasak from their kinsmen. If the quota wasn't met, the Toyon himself could be flogged, imprisoned, or of his property confiscated. This system cleverly turned Yakut against Yakut, forcing their own leaders to become the enforcers of a foreign power's demands. The traditional bonds of kinship and loyalty were strained to the breaking point. The economic impact was devastating. As we've seen, the Yakut economy was based on livestock. But the Russians demanded payment in fur. This forced a massive shift in their way of life. Men had to abandon their herds for weeks or months at a time to go on long, arduous hunting expeditions in the deep taiga. This neglect led to a decline in their herds, their primary source of food and real wealth. They were caught in a vicious cycle, forced to neglect their sustainable, life-giving economy to feed an insatiable, external one. They were liquidating their most valuable assets, their time and their livestock, to pay a tax in a currency they couldn't eat or wear. And the system was rife with corruption. Russian officials and traders routinely cheated the Yakut. They used faulty scales, demanded furs of an impossibly high quality, and charged exorbitant prices for Russian goods like iron tools, textiles, and alcohol. The introduction of vodka was particularly destructive, creating social problems and dependencies that further weakened the community. The trade was often just another form of extortion. Why did the Yakut people, proud and skilled survivors, tolerate this? What was the logic behind their submission? The whys are stark, lesson in power dynamics. The Russians had one overwhelming advantage: firearms. A small group of Cossacks armed with muskets could easily outmatch a much larger group of Yakut men armed with bows and arrows. There were rebellions, fierce and bloody uprisings in the 17th and early 18th centuries, but they were all brutally suppressed. The Yakut learned a hard lesson. Open resistance was suicide. So they adapted, employing a strategy of passive resistance, negotiation, and minimal compliance. They would try to pass off lower quality furs, hide their true population numbers to lower the tribute quota, and petition the authorities against the most abusive officials. They integrated the new reality into their old worldview. The Tsar in distant St. Petersburg was sometimes conceptualized as a powerful white Khan, a remote sky deity who had to be appeased with offerings, just like their own gods. The local Russian officials were like the capricious, greedy spirits of the land, dangerous, demanding, and best avoided. They adopted Russian tools and some goods, but fiercely held onto their core cultural practices, their language, their epic poetry, their belief in the three worlds, and the great summer festival of Yihaya. The 18th century was a balancing act, a long, slow process of cultural negotiation under duress. The shadow of the Tsar was long, and it was slowly, but surely remaking their world in its own image. The surprisingly peaceful lives of the Yakut herders were peaceful only in the sense that they had, for the most part, ceased open warfare against an unbeatable foe. It was the peace of subjugation, a quiet struggle, to maintain their identity in the face of an encroaching empire that saw their land not as a home, but as a source of revenue. The slow unravelling of their world had begun. The image of that man, walking his horse towards the fort, is where our journey into the past must gently come to an end. His world, a world of spirits and sour milk, of louse-ridden furs and life-giving herds, is fading, being irrevocably changed by forces from thousands of miles away. As we let him go, let the vibrant, challenging, and profoundly human world of the 18th century Yakut herders recede into the soft mists of time. The smoky hearth, the endless kumis, the frantic joy of the summer festival, and the deep, hungry silence of the winter, let them all dissolve now, leaving only the quiet of your own room and the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. The story is over, and it is time for rest. The hardships and anxieties of that distant life can fade away, replaced by a sense of calm and a deep, well-earned peace. There are no demands on you now, no spirits to appease, no cold to fight. There is only the soft comfort of your bed and the promise of a quiet, restorative sleep. Let the last echoes of the shaman's drum fade into the background hum of the night, carrying you gently into your dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.